You won't co-sign for your own grandson? That's what Tina said to me, her voice sharp like the edge of a cracked plate, as she stood there in the middle of the kitchen in her old pink robe with her arms crossed, and her eyes full of something I hadn't seen in her since she was a teenager, judgment. But let me go back a bit. It was a Thursday morning in Tempe, Arizona. The sun was already heating up the patio, and I was seated at the small round kitchen table with my cup of black coffee, plain toast, and the morning paper. Justin, my grandson, had just poured himself a bowl of cereal and was tapping his spoon against the edge like he had something big to say. I was already bracing for it. "Grandma," he started, not looking at me. "I was wondering if you could help me with something." I folded the paper slowly, placed it on the table. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "So, me and a couple of guys from class, Aaron and Theo, we're starting this tech thing. We've got the prototype almost ready, and the bank said we could get funding, but only if one of us has a co-signer." I didn't respond right away. I let the silence hang there for a second before asking, "How much?" 45,000. I blinked. "That's a lot of money, Justin." He rushed to explain. "It's not like I'm asking you to give me the money. It's just paperwork. You sign, we get the funds, and that's it. We already have a business name and a pitch deck. We're close. Do you have any income?" I asked quietly. "I work part-time at the phone shop, but this is going to take off, Grandma. It's what people are doing now, startups." I took a small sip of coffee. It was lukewarm by then. "Justin," I said gently, "I love that you have ambition. I really do. But co-signing alone isn't just paperwork. If something goes wrong, the debt becomes mine. I don't have $45,000 to spare. You know that." He looked like I'd kicked him. "So you're saying no?" I nodded once. "Yes, I am." The sound of a fork clattering against a plate pulled both our heads around. Tina had walked in just in time to catch the tail end of that conversation. She was still wearing her robe, her hair unbrushed, and her expression unreadable at first. Then she looked from Justin to me, and I saw something settle in her face, disappointment mixed with something colder. "You won't sign for your own grandson?" she repeated, louder this time. "Seriously?" I sat up a little straighter. "It's not that simple, Tina. It's a loan. If it goes bad, it's on me." She let out a short laugh. "He's your grandson, Mom. You're not even working. You live here. You don't pay rent. And when he comes to you for help, real help, you say no." "I pay for my food, my own medication, I contribute to bills," I said evenly, "and just because I live here doesn't mean I owe anyone my signature." That's when she said it. "Well then, don't expect to stay here for long." She didn't yell. She didn't slam a drawer or throw a dish. She just said it, like it was a fact, like she'd been waiting to say it for a while. Justin stood there frozen. His spoon hung in the air mid-scoop. No one moved. The only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator. I folded my napkin slowly and placed it next to my plate. My coffee had gone cold. I stood up, pushed in my chair, and walked out of the kitchen. Not because I didn't have more to say, but because I'd learned that morning that silence sometimes says more than any argument ever could. I walked back to the small bedroom at the end of the hallway, the room they gave me when I moved in after my mini-stroke last year. I had sold my place in Prescott and came down to Tempe to be closer to Tina while I recovered. The doctor said it would only take a few months to get my strength back, and Tina said, "You can stay with us for a little while." A little while had become a year and a half. I didn't complain. I made myself useful. I watched the house when they traveled, cooked dinner on weekdays, ran errands when Tina got tied up with work, and never asked for more than what I needed. I didn't meddle. I didn't take up space. I simply fit in. At least I thought I did. But that sentence from Tina was still ringing in my ears. "Don't expect to stay here for long." I sat on the edge of my bed. The room was still and too bright. The curtains were thin and let in the harsh morning sun, but I didn't move to close them. I just sat there and let the words settle. I thought back to the early days after my stroke, how Tina had picked me up from the hospital and said, "Don't worry about a thing, Mom. We'll take care of you." How Justin had made me tea and brought me extra pillows. I thought I was part of something here. Family. But now I was just a name on a bill, a warm body in a room. A mother who didn't sign. A grandmother who said no. They weren't yelling. They weren't pushing me out physically. But the message was clear. You're only welcome as long as you agree. I looked down at my hands. They were still strong, a little wrinkled but steady. I hadn't had another stroke. I took care of myself. I still paid for my phone, my car insurance, my small expenses. I was not helpless. But suddenly, I felt very unwanted. The hallway outside my door was quiet. I could hear Justin's voice in the kitchen, softer now, and Tina saying something in a low, fast tone. I didn't listen. I didn't want to. Instead, I reached for my notebook from the nightstand drawer, the one where I kept grocery lists, appointments, and my budget notes. I opened to a blank page and wrote 2 things. 1, look up senior housing options in Chandler. 2, figure out how much I still have in savings. Then I set the pen down, closed the notebook, and folded my hands in my lap. I didn't cry. I didn't fume. I didn't plan to argue, but I knew this. If they could threaten to take my home away because I didn't give them my signature, then maybe this was never my home to begin with. And maybe, just maybe, it was time I started thinking about what home really meant for me. If you've ever kept quiet to keep the peace and paid for it, click the like button. Share this with someone who needs to remember their worth. It started with a favor, just a simple offer. After my minor stroke last spring, I wasn't able to live alone in my place in Prescott anymore. The stairs were too steep, my balance wasn't reliable, and the thought of slipping in the shower kept me up at night. Tina had called and said, "Come stay with us for a few months, Mom, just until you're back on your feet." I remember her voice sounding warm, even proud to be offering. I told her I didn't want to be a burden. She laughed it off. "You raised me, remember? It's the least I can do." So I packed a few bags, sold what I could, and moved into her 2-bedroom condo in Tempe. I didn't bring much. A couple of suitcases, a few framed photos, my favorite teacup, and a small box of things that reminded me of my late husband, Robert. Tina cleared out her home office for me, said she'd work from the kitchen table for a while. It wasn't perfect, but it was kind. At the time, I truly believed it would be temporary. "Just a few months," she said. "Then we'd see." That was 18 months ago. I didn't complain. I cooked dinner most nights. I made sure the fridge was never empty. I paid for my own groceries and helped cover the electric bill when it spiked during the summer heat. When Justin needed a ride to class or work, I drove him if I could. I never expected anything for free. I stayed out of the way, never raised my voice, kept my visits with neighbors short and quiet, folded laundry without being asked, paid my share without being reminded. But what started as a favor had slowly turned into something else, something tighter, something less generous. That morning, after Tina made her comment, "Don't expect to stay here for long," everything shifted. Not loudly, not at once, but it shifted. Justin left shortly after breakfast, muttering something under his breath about me being selfish. He didn't slam the door, but he didn't close it gently either. I stayed in my room most of the day. I read a few chapters of a book I'd already read twice before, then got up to fold the towels from the dryer. Tina didn't speak to me for the rest of the day. Not a hello, not a thank you, just silence. She walked past me in the hallway like I was part of the wallpaper. The same daughter who once cried at my hospital bed, now barely nodded in my direction. I tried not to take it personally, but there's only so many cold shoulders a person can carry before it starts to feel like blame. And blame has a way of turning your presence into a problem. That night, I made a small dinner. Leftovers, really? A baked potato and steamed broccoli. I didn't cook for everyone like I usually did. I just wasn't in the mood. I washed the plate, dried it, and went to my room. I wanted to check the weather and maybe look up a recipe for oatmeal bread I hadn't made in years. When I opened my laptop, it wouldn't connect. I thought maybe the router needed to be reset. I walked into the living room, where it usually sat behind the TV stand, blinking softly. Nothing. No blinking light. No connection. Just a dead signal. I checked my phone next. No Wi-Fi there either. I knew the internet was still working for the rest of the house. Tina had been on a Zoom call just that morning. Justin was always streaming something on his tablet. But my room? Dead. I walked back to the hallway and stood outside Tina's door. I could hear her moving around, the faint sound of drawers closing. I raised my hand to knock, but then I didn't. I just stood there for a moment, listening, and lowered my hand again. What would I even say? Hey, Tina, did you disconnect the Wi-Fi in my room? No matter how I phrased it, it would sound like an accusation. And if I asked, she'd either deny it or roll her eyes and say I was imagining things. That's how it always goes when things start to turn cold. They don't argue. They just chip away, little by little. So I said nothing. I returned to my room, turned off the lamp, and sat in the dark. I didn't feel angry. I felt tired. Not physically, but the kind of tired that settles in your chest and makes you think twice before asking for anything. I stared at the ceiling and let the silence fill the space around me. The house felt smaller than it used to, the walls a little closer, the air a little heavier. I had once thought love was enough to hold a family together, that if you gave enough, helped enough, stayed quiet enough, people would notice, appreciate you. But love, in families like ours, sometimes turns into something else. A quiet kind of accounting, where every favor is remembered and every no becomes a debt. I hadn't said no out of spite. I said no because I couldn't afford to gamble with money I didn't have. But to them, it was more than that. To them, I had broken some silent agreement. They had taken me in, helped me heal. And in return, I was supposed to give whatever was asked, whenever it was asked. I sat up in bed, pulled the notebook from my nightstand again, and flipped to the page I'd written earlier. I added one more line beneath my to-do list. 3, don't wait until you're pushed. Walk when you still can. I didn't know when or how, but I was starting to see it clearly. This favor I'd been living under, it had a shelf life. And that shelf was now starting to tilt. It wasn't going to collapse today. Maybe not even tomorrow. But the foundation had cracked, and no one else seemed interested in fixing it. So maybe it was up to me. Maybe it had always been. The house didn't explode overnight. It just changed. Slowly, quietly. By the end of the week, I couldn't ignore it anymore. It started with the doors. They used to creak open softly when someone came home or left. Now they slammed. Not hard. Not enough to break anything, but just enough to remind me that I wasn't being thought about. Lights were left off in the hallway when I walked through. The kitchen sink stayed full after dinner. Meals were cooked, eaten, and cleared without a single word in my direction. If I walked in, the talking stopped. The TV would stay on, but the conversation died. Justin passed me in the hallway 3 times that Monday. Not once did he say a word. No, morning, Grandma. No, how are you? Not even a nod. Just looked through me like I wasn't there. Tina wasn't much better. If I asked a question, do you want me to pick up eggs? She'd answer with a flat no. If I asked if she needed help with dinner, she'd say, "Got it," and turn away. I wash my own clothes on Wednesdays. It was our usual rhythm. I'd do mine first thing in the morning, then Tina would follow. One day I went to load my basket and saw a pile of their clothes already spinning in the washer. I checked the list we kept taped on the fridge. The days had been switched. Mine had been crossed out. No one told me. I opened the cabinet under the laundry sink to grab my detergent. It was gone. In its place was a different brand, a cheaper one I didn't like, the kind that gave me rashes. When I asked Tina about it, she said, "Ran out. We use this now." That was it. No offer to get mine. No explanation. I could have made a fuss. I could have gone to the store and replaced it myself just to prove a point. But I didn't. Instead, I wrote it down, not in anger, just in truth. Page by page, I started keeping a quiet record. Not out of spite, just so I wouldn't forget how I ended up feeling so uninvited. I wrote down things that felt small on their own, but together painted a picture. March 3rd, laundry day changed without notice. March 4th, Justin passed me 3 times, never looked up. March 5th, Wi-Fi still down in my room. Tina didn't answer when I knocked. March 7th, my name not added to the grocery list. First time in over a year. They weren't yelling at me. No one said, "Get out." But they didn't have to. The message was coming through just fine. I stopped joining dinner at the table. I'd fix myself a plate earlier and eat in my room. It was easier that way. No tension, no cold stares, just silence I could control. I started looking things up on my phone when I was at the library or out running errands. Senior apartments in Tempe, shared housing programs for older women, independent living with ground floor units. I found a place in Chandler that looked promising. Small units, quiet, utilities included. It wasn't fancy, but it looked clean and had a garden in the back. I bookmarked it and wrote the number down in my notebook. I also started going over my bank balance. I'd saved a bit here and there. My Social Security check wasn't much, but if I kept things simple, I could stretch it. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. I wasn't ready, but I was thinking about it every day now. At night, I'd sit by the small window in my room. I used to enjoy the quiet here. Now it felt different, heavier, like I wasn't just alone, I was being kept apart. I didn't mind silence when it was shared, but this wasn't that. This was the kind of silence people use when they don't know how to say what they're really thinking, or maybe they do know, and they're just hoping you'll figure it out for yourself. I looked around my room. The furniture wasn't mine. The mattress was Tina's old guest bed. The lamp was something she found at a garage sale. The dresser drawers still stuck when I pulled them out too far. None of it felt like mine anymore. Maybe it never had. I turned back to my notebook and wrote something new at the bottom of the page. I didn't lose my voice in the stroke, but I might lose it if I stay here. I stared at that line for a while, then underlined it. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't confused, but I was tired of pretending things felt normal when they didn't. I wasn't waiting to be thrown out. I was deciding if I should leave before that happened. If you've ever been made to feel like a burden in your own family, comment below. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want a scene. I just wanted to live somewhere where I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells in my own corner of someone else's home, where saying no didn't make me disposable, where silence didn't mean I was being erased piece by piece. I knew then that this wasn't just a rough patch. It was a shift, one that wasn't going to shift back. The next morning, I made a phone call. I waited until Tina left for work and Justin was still asleep. I sat at the small desk in my room, opened my notebook, and dialed the number I'd written down for the community housing office in Chandler. A woman named Karen answered. Her voice was kind but straight to the point. I told her I was looking for something simple. Ground floor, if possible. Quiet. Affordable. I didn't need much. She listened, asked a few questions, then said, "We do have something, actually. It's a one-bedroom on West Maple. Older complex. Not fancy, but it's safe and clean. Most of the residents are over 60. Is there a waiting list?" I asked. "There usually is," she said, "but this one just opened up. If you're interested, I can hold it for 72 hours. After that, we'll need a deposit to keep it reserved." I thanked her, got the address, told her I'd be in touch. After I hung up, I just sat there, hands in my lap, phone still warm from the call. It had been so long since something had felt possible. I looked around the room again, the bookshelf stuffed with someone else's books. The bedspread I never picked out. The lamp with a crooked shade that I kept fixing but always tilted back. Nothing in here was mine. I thought back to the first place Robert and I rented when we got married. A little duplex on the edge of Sierra Vista. The carpet was worn and the kitchen was the size of a closet, but it was ours. I still remember how we picked out curtains from a discount bin and stayed up late putting together a wobbly bookshelf from a kit. We didn't have much, but it felt like home because it was the first time we had a space that belonged to just us. That night, I pulled out a blank sheet of paper from my notebook and made a list. What I own, clothes I actually wear, my wedding ring, the photo of Robert at the Grand Canyon, one cast iron skillet, my sewing kit, a box of recipe cards, that green scarf from last Christmas, my medication, what I need, a safe place to sleep, a hot plate, a chair with good back support, curtains that close all the way, a place to sit outside, what I can leave behind, the floral mug Tina never liked, extra towels that aren't really mine, the guest blanket with the scratchy corners, the silence I've been carrying. I folded the list and placed it in my drawer. I didn't feel scared. I felt steady. About an hour later, there was a knock at my door. Before I could even answer, it opened. Tina stepped inside, holding a glass of wine in one hand and her phone in the other. "You got a minute?" she asked. I nodded. She sat on the edge of the bed without waiting for me to say yes. I need to get this off my chest. She started, staring down at her phone. "I talked to Justin. He's still upset. He really thought you'd back him up." I didn't say anything. I just listened. "I'm not saying he was right to ask," she continued, "but you've been living here for over a year. We've tried to make space for you, adjust things. I gave up my office, remember? I work at the kitchen counter now, and I know you help out, but sometimes it feels like you don't appreciate how hard we've tried." I waited a beat before answering. "I do appreciate it, Tina," I said, "more than you know, but help isn't a contract." She blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means I didn't move in here thinking I'd owe you my name on a loan application. I never said you owed us, but you made it clear when I said no that staying here was conditional. And that's not help. That's just a longer leash." She stood up quickly. "That's not fair, Mom." "I'm not trying to fight," I said calmly, "but I need you to hear me. I'm not asking for charity. I've done my part, paid my share, kept quiet when things got tight. But I can't keep living in a place where I feel like my worth depends on saying yes." Tina crossed her arms. "So what, you're moving out?" "I haven't decided yet, but I'm thinking about it." She didn't answer right away, just looked at the floor. "You've changed," she finally said. "Maybe I've just stopped apologizing for having boundaries." Tina left the room without another word, closed the door behind her, not hard, not soft, just enough. That night, I looked at the list again. It didn't scare me. It made sense. Sometimes starting over isn't a big moment. It's a small one, a quiet one, a phone call, a list, a conversation that doesn't end with fixing things, but with finally telling the truth. I didn't know where I'd end up, but I knew what I wouldn't carry with me anymore. And that was a beginning. I made the appointment for Thursday morning. Karen had given me the address for the apartment in Chandler, and I arranged to meet someone from the office there. Her name was Denise. She said she'd be waiting outside the building in a blue sweater. The bus ride took about 25 minutes. I didn't mind. It gave me time to think without distraction. I watched the neighborhoods change. As we moved east, older homes, fewer palm trees, more shade. When we pulled up to the stop, near West Maple, I could already see the complex ahead. Beige walls, flat roof, simple, nothing shiny, but clean. Denise waved when she saw me. She had short silver hair and warm eyes. She shook my hand like we already knew each other. "Thanks for coming out," she said. "I'll show you the unit. It's nothing fancy, but folks like the peace and quiet here." She unlocked the door and stepped aside, so I could walk in first. It was small. No question about that. A narrow living room with an old ceiling fan, laminate floors, and a tiny kitchen off to the side with white cabinets. The bedroom had one window facing the street and a closet with folding doors. The bathroom was plain but clean, with grab bars already installed near the tub. But what caught my eye was the little balcony out back. Just enough room for a chair and a potted plant. And right next to the front door, a single hook for keys. Mine. Denise walked me through the details. Rent, utilities, what was included, how often maintenance came around. No pool, no gym, no extras. Just a quiet building, mostly occupied by folks over 60. She asked if I wanted to fill out the paperwork. I hesitated, not because I didn't want it, but because saying yes would mean making everything real. "Can I ask you to hold it?" I said. "For how long?" she asked. 5 days. She smiled. "That's reasonable. But if someone else comes in, I'll have to call and give you the choice first." I nodded. Fair enough. I thanked her and told her I'd be in touch. She handed me a card with her extension and wished me a good day. Outside, I didn't head straight home. I walked 2 blocks and found a small thrift store. There was a cafe next door with a couple of benches out front. I went in and bought a cup of hot tea and a cranberry scone. I sat on the bench and watched people go by. 2 older women came down the sidewalk from the other direction. One had a small bag, the other was holding a cup of something warm. They laughed at something and stopped to share a piece of pastry between them. It wasn't anything big, just a simple moment between friends. But I found myself staring, not with envy, just recognition. That used to be me. Years ago, I had a circle of women I saw every week. We'd meet for tea or rummage sales, exchange recipes, trade old magazines. After Robert died, it faded away. People moved. Life got quiet. I missed having a small piece of the world where I belonged. As I sipped my tea, I looked down at the contact card Denise had given me. The name of the complex was printed in bold letters. Silver Pines Community Living. I read it once, then again, and I felt something stir. Not excitement, not fear, just a kind of stillness that felt like permission. I took a breath and said it out loud. "I think I'm ready." It wasn't dramatic, no grand moment, just a quiet sentence to myself. But it felt real. I wasn't jumping into something just to escape. I was choosing something because I finally believed I could. I threw away my empty cup and walked back to the bus stop. When I got home, Tina wasn't back from work yet. The condo was silent except for the faint hum of the dishwasher. I went to my room and sat at the desk again. I opened my notebook and drew a line through the words. Look up senior housing options. Next to it, I wrote, hold placed, decision due Monday. It felt good to write something with an end point. For the first time in a long time, I had a choice in front of me. Not a demand, not an obligation, just a plain, simple choice. The sun was going down by then. I pulled back the curtain and looked out at the patio. The plants were dry. No one had watered them in days. They used to be mine, but Tina had taken them over last summer when I got sick for a week. After that, she started calling them hers. That was fine. I didn't want to argue over potted plants, but it said a lot. I picked up my phone and looked at the picture I had taken of the apartment balcony. I could already see myself sitting out there with a book or watching the birds come and go. It wouldn't be big. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would be mine. And that was enough. When I got back from the walk and closed the door behind me, I didn't waste any time. I grabbed an empty box from the closet and started packing. Not everything, just the things I already knew I'd be taking with me. My photo albums, the pair of slippers Robert gave me for our last Christmas together, my old recipe cards, and the tea tin with the faded roses on the lid. I wrapped each item in an old dish towel and placed them carefully inside. Halfway through the drawer of odds and ends, I found a small white envelope. No return address. Just my name on the front in Robert's handwriting. I knew what it was. I'd found it a few months after he passed, tucked inside one of the kitchen cookbooks I hadn't opened in years. I read it once, cried for hours, and tucked it away again. Now, I sat down on the bed, unfolded the flap, and read it for the second time. My Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm probably already gone. And knowing you, you're probably putting everyone else ahead of yourself just like you always do. But let me tell you something clearly, so there's no confusion. You were always the strong one. The glue. The reason anything worked. If you ever find yourself feeling small, like you're taking up too much space or bothering someone just by breathing, I want you to walk away. Not out of anger, but because you deserve more. You always did. Remember who you are. You're not just a wife, a mom, or a grandma. You're Margaret Myers. You built this family. And if anyone makes you feel less than that, go. That's when you'll remember who you are. Love, Robert. I folded the letter slowly and held it for a while in my hands. I didn't cry. I just sat quietly and let his words settle in again. He knew me better than anyone ever had. And he was right. I put the letter inside my purse. It was coming with me. That afternoon, I packed 2 more boxes, just things I knew I'd need. The rest I'd deal with later. It was funny how many things I thought were mine until I looked at them more closely. Most of it wasn't important. Most of it could stay behind. I was taping up the second box when I heard a knock at the door, followed immediately by it swinging open. Justin walked in without asking. "You're moving out?" I looked up at him. His face wasn't angry, just unsettled, like he hadn't really believed I'd go through with it. "I heard you on the phone the other day," he said. "Mom told me." I stood up and wiped my hands on my shirt. "Yes, I found a place." "Why?" he asked. "Because of the loan thing?" "No," I said calmly. "Because of everything that came after it." He ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I know things got weird. Mom can be intense, but you don't have to leave. I mean, it's not like we kicked you out." I gave him a soft smile. "No, you just made it clear I wasn't welcome unless I said yes. That's not what I meant." "Justin," I said gently, "you're young. You think asking someone to sign their name on a $45,000 loan is just business. But for me, it's a risk I can't afford. And when I said no, your mother threatened my housing. That's not support. That's leverage." He didn't say anything. I'm not mad at you, I added, but helping family doesn't mean giving up your sense of self. I've done a lot for this household. I've helped where I could. Quietly, steadily. And now I need something different. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the packed box. So you're really leaving? Yes. Friday. Is it a good place? It's small, but it's mine. He nodded slowly. There was a silence between us that felt different. Not uncomfortable, just real, like for the first time. He saw me not just as grandma, but as a person who had limits. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner, he said. I'm glad you're saying something now. He stood up and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he looked back. Can I help you pack? Sure, I said, if you want to. That night, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. The Wi-Fi in my room still didn't work. I tethered my phone and pulled up the apartment listing in Chandler. My name was still on it. I clicked the Confirm Reservation button. A small box popped up. Move-in date. Friday. I clicked yes. It was done. I leaned back in the chair and exhaled slowly. I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath for days. That night, I slept deeply. Not because the bed was any softer, but because I had something to look forward to that wasn't based on someone else's mood. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had a say, and that made all the difference. How many women do you know who've kept quiet for years just to avoid rocking the boat? Hit subscribe if you believe they deserve better. By Wednesday morning, I was down to the last 2 boxes. It was strange how much lighter I felt with each one I filled. Not just because I was almost done, but because I finally knew I wasn't waiting on anyone else's permission. I didn't need much. I'd already decided what mattered. The first thing I packed was the photo album. The brown leather one with the frayed corners. Inside were pictures from the first year Robert and I were married, our daughter's school plays, Justin as a toddler in overalls. I tucked it carefully between 2 folded sweaters so it wouldn't bend. Next came my cast iron skillet, the one I'd used to make cornbread for over 30 years. It had the weight of memory. Some people didn't get attached to cookware, but to me, it was part of home. My old church hat came next, wide-brimmed with a small black ribbon. I hadn't worn it much in recent years, but it still made me feel proud when I held it, like I hadn't been forgotten by the woman I used to be. The last thing I placed in that box was my faded recipe book, the one with yellowed pages and scribbles in the margins. Some of the recipes I hadn't made in decades. Some belonged to my mother, and a few were copied down from friends long gone. But each one reminded me of a time when meals were shared, not scheduled. Everything else I sorted into piles. I took 3 bags of clothes to the women's shelter downtown. Warm coats, gently used shoes, some scarves I hadn't worn in years. The woman at the counter thanked me twice. I told her it was time to let them go. Another bag went to Goodwill. Old towels, a set of cups I never liked, books I knew I wouldn't read again. Letting go felt easier than I expected. When you're moving into a small place, you don't ask what looks good. You ask what gives you peace. Later that afternoon, I sat down at the desk and opened my notebook again. I turned to a fresh page and titled it, Next 6 Months, Budget. I started listing what I knew I'd be spending monthly: rent, groceries, medication, utilities. I wrote everything down carefully. I wasn't guessing. I was planning. It all fit. It would be tight, but I'd be okay. I even carved out a small amount for church dues and 2 hair appointments. I might not splurge often, but I wouldn't give up feeling like myself either. I closed the notebook and placed it in the tote bag that would ride with me on moving day. Tina hadn't said much since our last talk. She moved around the house like I wasn't there. Her footsteps felt heavier. The fridge had a few more sticky notes on it now, reminders to herself, grocery items, but also small messages I think were meant for me. Buy only what you eat. One read. Another, don't forget this is temporary. I didn't respond to any of them. There was nothing left to say. Justin, on the other hand, started checking in more. He hovered a bit, asking if I needed help lifting boxes or if I'd found someone to help me move. I could tell he wanted to ask the bigger question, but didn't know how. That evening, as I folded my cardigan and placed it neatly in my final box, he stood in the doorway. Are you sure about this? He asked. I looked at him. Yes, I am. He stared at the box, then back at me. I didn't mean for things to go this way. I know. He stepped closer, then wrapped his arms around me. Not rushed, not stiff. A full hug. I hugged him back. You'll still visit? He asked quietly. If I'm invited. You are. I nodded. Then I will. That was all we needed to say. That night, I opened the window in my room. It had been months since I let the air in like that. The evening breeze slipped in gently, cool against my arms. The sounds of cars driving by felt distant, like the world was moving but not rushing me. For the first time in a long time, the room didn't feel like a waiting space. It just felt like a room. A space I was ready to leave behind without regret. I lay down and pulled the blanket up to my chest. The boxes were stacked neatly by the wall. Everything I needed was packed. Everything I didn't was already gone. As I drifted to sleep, I realized something. Freedom isn't loud. It doesn't bang the door shut. It doesn't shout over the silence. It moves quietly. It smells like fresh laundry and cool air. It feels like soft fabric under your fingertips and peace in your chest. It's waking up and knowing you don't owe anyone your name on a piece of paper to be worthy of a home. If this part gave you goosebumps, don't scroll past, like this video. Show the world that elder women still have power, choice, and voice. Friday morning came with quiet skies and a soft breeze. I woke up just before the alarm went off. There wasn't much left to do. The boxes were ready. My small suitcase sat by the door. My purse had my notebook, the envelope from Robert, my medicine, and the keys to the storage locker, where I'd put a few winter coats. I didn't wait for a goodbye. Tina was in the kitchen when I wheeled the suitcase out. She looked up briefly, then back down at her phone. No words, no questions, just silence. Justin came out from his room with bed hair and sleepy eyes. He helped me carry the heavier box to the car. He didn't say much either, but when I got in, he leaned in and kissed me on the cheek. Text me when you get there, he said. I nodded. A neighbor 2 doors down had offered to help unload once I arrived. Her name was Lorraine. We'd spoken a few times near the mailbox. She had 2 cats and baked on weekends. She said she'd bring banana bread once I was settled. The drive to Chandler took under 30 minutes. The streets felt slower that morning, like even the world knew I was starting over. The complex looked just as I remembered it. Nothing shiny, nothing loud. Just soft beige buildings, tidy bushes, and a row of mailboxes near the entrance. Denise met me at the office and handed over the keys. Welcome home, Margaret, she said with a smile. I carried the boxes one by one with Lorraine's help. The unit was small but neat. Sunlight poured into the living room. The window didn't stick like Tina's had. The screen wasn't torn. Everything smelled faintly like lemon cleaner and fresh paint. I placed Robert's picture on the windowsill first. I didn't have many frames, but that one always came with me. He was smiling in that photo, his arm around me, his shirt a little wrinkled, his eyes squinting against the Arizona sun. Next, I unpacked my skillet and slid it into the lower cabinet. I placed my recipe book in the drawer beneath the toaster and folded the church hat into the top shelf of the small closet. Each item found its place without fuss. I hung my robe on the bathroom door and put my slippers beside the bed. By 5 o'clock, I was done. That night, I made a simple dinner, vegetable soup from a can with a slice of toast. I added pepper, a dash of garlic powder, and stirred it on the stove while soft jazz played from a small radio I brought with me. I ate at the little kitchen table with the window open. No voices in the hallway, no slammed doors, just a calm evening breeze and the sound of a neighbor's TV faintly through the wall. After the dishes were washed and dried, I sat at my desk and pulled out the notebook. I opened to a new page and wrote, "I'm not lonely. I'm alone. There's a difference." I let that sit on the page for a few moments, then underlined it once. I thought about what I'd left behind, not with sadness, but with clarity. I didn't run away. I didn't burn bridges. I simply chose peace. That weekend, I walked down to the local market. The air smelled like oranges and cinnamon. I picked up fresh fruit, oatmeal, and a new pair of house slippers that were on sale. On the way home, I passed a bulletin board with flyers. One caught my eye: Saturday Book Club for women 60 plus. New members welcome. I showed up that afternoon. There were 7 of us. We sat in the back room of the library, sipping coffee and talking about a novel I hadn't even read. No one asked me to explain why I came. No one looked surprised when I introduced myself. It felt easy. Later that week, I met my next-door neighbor. Her name was Rosa. She was 71, used a cane, and had a laugh that made her shoulders bounce. She brought over a plate of tamales wrapped in foil and told me I looked like someone who enjoyed real food. She was right. We sat together on my balcony and shared stories about husbands, kids, and the things we both wished we'd done sooner. Rosa said she'd lived alone for 9 years and never once regretted it. That night, Justin sent a short text. "Hope you're settling in okay. Let me know if you need anything." I wrote back, "Thank you. I'm doing well." Tina didn't message. I didn't expect her to, and that was okay. I didn't cry. I didn't stare at the phone waiting. I just folded my blanket, set my tea on the nightstand, and opened the window one more time before bed. The air was cool. The room was quiet. My chest didn't feel heavy anymore. And as I lay down, I thought to myself, this is what real peace feels like. It doesn't knock loudly. It arrives softly when you stop apologizing for needing it. 1 month passed before I even noticed the date. Time didn't move fast. It just stopped feeling heavy. Days had rhythm now. I'd wake up early, open the window, and start my morning with a quiet cup of coffee, not someone else's schedule. The apartment had grown familiar. My chair near the window had a small dent now, where I liked to sit. The bookshelf had 3 library books waiting to be returned. The radio stayed tuned to the same soft station that played old jazz and slow blues. That Saturday, I visited the local flea market near downtown Chandler. Rows of tables with secondhand tools, homemade jewelry, and hand-sewn aprons. What caught my eye was a small wind chime hanging from the edge of a vendor's canopy. It wasn't fancy, just 5 thin metal rods hanging from a wooden ring. At the center, a flat stone painted in a dull shade of blue. It made no sound at first, but when the wind moved just enough, it gave off a soft, clean tone. Not loud, not showy, but honest. I bought it without bargaining. Back at my apartment, I hung it just outside my balcony door. It took a few minutes to get the height right, but once I stepped back, I knew it would only ring when the breeze was just right, and that made it feel like a gift. A few days later, I got a call from Denise at the office. "Margaret, would you be open to something?" she asked. The local community center was starting a new program for women over 50 who wanted to volunteer. They were pairing up older women with younger women, those going through career shifts, divorce, relocation, just someone to talk to. I think you'd be perfect, Denise said. I said yes before I could talk myself out of it. By the following Tuesday, I was seated at a round table with a young woman named Keisha. She was 27, a single mother, and recently moved to Arizona after leaving a difficult situation back home. I don't need advice, she said right away, just someone who gets it. I smiled and said, "You've come to the right place." We didn't talk about big things right away. First, it was food prices and job interviews. Then it turned into family and boundaries and how starting over doesn't come with instructions. Each week we met, the conversation ran a little deeper. And every time I left, I felt like I'd been the one given something. One afternoon after our session, I returned home and found an envelope in my mailbox. My name was written in Justin's handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Grandma, I've been thinking a lot about everything, about what I asked you to do, and how I acted when you said no. I didn't get it at the time, but I do now. You did the right thing. You didn't let us pressure you. You stood your ground. I didn't see it then. I see it now. Thank you for teaching me something I didn't know I needed to learn. I miss you, and I'm proud of you. Justin." I folded the letter slowly and set it on my kitchen table. I didn't cry. I just sat with it. Later that evening, I listened to the wind chime as it rang once, soft and clear. The next day, I missed a call from Tina. She didn't leave a full message, just a voicemail that said, "Hope you're doing okay." That's all. No apology, no invitation, just those few words. I didn't call back, but I did smile. It wasn't a bitter smile. It was the kind of smile that says, "I've moved on." And I didn't lose anything doing it. I made soup that night, chicken and rice with fresh herbs from the market. Rosa came over with crackers, and we ate on the balcony while the sun dipped below the roofline. It wasn't special, but it was full. And I realized something. You don't need a big house or a title or everyone's approval to feel like you belong. You just need space. The kind of space where no one's love has conditions. If someone ever made you feel small for choosing peace, don't let this story end here. Share it. Comment. So if you've ever been made to feel guilty for saying no, if someone's love came with strings attached, remember this. You are not selfish for choosing peace. You are not wrong for needing your own space. You are not too old to begin again. And you are not here to earn your place. You already belong. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever felt tolerated more than appreciated? Let's talk in the comments below. And if this story spoke to you in any way, please give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs it, and don't forget to subscribe for more real, honest stories like this one. Your voice matters, and you're not alone here.